Prior to 1965, women's sports at Bemidji State College were a student-run endeavor. Unable to receive funding from the college's Student Activity Committee, women's physical education students formed the Women's Athletic Association, later called the Women's Recreation Association, to manage programs that were funded by the Women's Physical Education Department. With no release time, women faculty took on the responsibility of coaching these sports. Women participating in this era met weekly for intramural and recreational activities. They occasionally traveled to other schools for sports days, where several schools gathered to play games and socialize. These extracurricular activities were considered positive for participants, not because it gave women opportunities to compete, but because it benefited their professional development as future physical education teachers. Many of the Bemidji State College pioneers who would eventually serve pivotal roles in creating competitive athletic opportunities for women began by helping students organize modern dance and synchronized swimming shows. These were incredibly popular events, and the modern dance show continues to this day as the Funtastic Dance Follies. By the mid-1960s, interest in sports days began to fade. With women physical education majors expressing a desire for more formal competition, Bemidji State and other colleges gradually began to establish the foundation for intercollegiate competition for women athletes. In the fall of 1966, several schools in Minnesota and North Dakota met to establish an operating code for women's intercollegiate athletics competition. This code established some rules for competition and a master game schedule. In the spring of 1968, representatives of a half-dozen women's physical education departments at colleges in Minnesota and North Dakota met to begin formal conversations about forming an organization or conference. While behind-the-scenes negotiations over a formal conference constitution continued for several years, in 1969, Bemidji State joined Concordia College, Moorhead State College, North Dakota State University, and the University of North Dakota as schools competing in the new Min-Kota Conference. Recognized as one of the country's first women's athletic conferences, the Min-Kota would eventually grow to 8 members and gave women's athletics in Minnesota and North Dakota a strong foundation for the rest of the decade. As other regional women's sports conferences began appearing across the country, conversations began about a national organizing body. Despite the rapid growth of women's sports, the National Collegiate Athletics Association, which at the time included only men's sports, had no interest in governing women's programs. In 1971, Bemidji State joined other women's athletic programs from across the country to create the Association of Intercollegiate Athletics for Women. The AIAW's emergence also led colleges and universities to reorganize into more local conferences that aligned with the AIAW's state, regional, and national playoff format. Following this trend, Bemidji State became a founding member of the Northern Sun Conference, which exclusively included women's athletic programs in Minnesota, after the Min-Kota Conference disbanded in 1979. Women's athletics at Bemidji State thrived during this revolutionary era of growth, and support from the college grew quickly. In 1969, Bemidji State's Student Activities Committee allocated $3,400 to women's sports. By 1978, BSU was offering $12,500 in scholarships for women athletes each year, and nearly $31,000 in operating funds, primarily from student activity fees. BSU was widely regarded for the quality of its women's physical education department, which required all PE majors to participate in intercollegiate sports. The university took advantage of this reputation, attracting women athletes to BSU. This influx of strong athletes, combined with increasing financial support, led to incredible success. Bemidji State Field Hockey won 5 consecutive conference championships from 1974 to 1978. Volleyball also won 5 titles between 1971 and 1979. Track captured 2 outdoor and 1 indoor championships, and basketball and tennis each won 2 conference crowns. But none were more successful than gymnastics, which captured 10 consecutive conference titles between 1969 and 1979. Following the tremendous growth and success experienced by Bemidji State in the 1970s, the 1980s and early 1990s were marked by change and instability. At a national level, the NCAA and National Association of Intercollegiate Athletics, the NAIA, began to recognize women's athletics as more than a passing fad. In 1981, the NCAA voted to begin offering women's championships. Bemidji State joined a national debate over whether to move from the AIAW to the NCAA, a decision already made by more than 100 larger athletic programs. In the summer of 1981, the AIAW sued the NCAA, claiming the organization was becoming a monopoly in violation of federal antitrust laws. The AIAW lost its case and disbanded in 1982. BSU moved most of its programs to the NAIA, keeping an NCAA Division III affiliation for its men's ice hockey and women's field hockey programs. The university's women's programs remained in the Northern Sun Conference, while its men's programs competed in the Northern Intercollegiate Conference, and BSU men's and women's athletics maintained separate athletic directors. Bemidji State's sports offerings changed dramatically during this era as well. Swimming was dropped in 1982, but cross-country running, golf, and softball were added to meet athlete interest and maintain compliance with Title IX. Gymnastics was dropped in 1983, and in 1985, field hockey, BSU's most successful women's program, fell victim to a lack of area opponents and the need to travel outside of the region to find games. BSU elevated its cross-country skiing club to varsity status in 1986, and then dropped golf in 1989. This tumultuous decade also saw BSU's programs change coaches often. Unlike the stability and success enjoyed by Bemidji State during the 1970s, coaching instability led to inconsistent results on the scoreboard. However, many sports were still able to achieve regional and national prominence during the 1980s. Bemidji State's modern era of women's athletics began with a pair of significant moves, one regionally and one nationally. In 1992, the Northern Sun and Northern Intercollegiate Conferences merged into the Northern Sun Intercollegiate Conference, which marked the first time ever that BSU's men's and women's teams both competed in the same conference. The same year, BSU joined members of the new NSIC and elevated its overall athletic programs from the NAIA to NCAA Division II, in part for opportunities to participate in the more prestigious NCAA postseason championships. As with the early 1980s, the early 1990s saw BSU restructure its sports offerings. Cross-country running and skiing were both dropped in 1992, but the running program would return 3 years later. Golf also returned from a 7-year hiatus when it was added to BSU's sport lineup in 1996 alongside women's soccer. Then in 1998, Bemidji State made one of its most significant investments in women's athletics when it added women's ice hockey, BSU's first NCAA Division I women's sport. Today, Bemidji State University sponsors 10 NCAA women's sports. Several Minn Kota Conference-era sports remain at BSU, including basketball, tennis, track and field, now with both indoor and outdoor teams, and volleyball. They are joined by cross-country, golf, ice hockey, soccer, and softball. Given the remarkable history assembled by generations of pioneers and visionaries over the last 5 decades, what does the future hold for women's athletics at Bemidji State University?
The future of Bemidji State Women's Athletics is empowering, it's encouraging, and I am excited for the future and the opportunities given to the younger girls to be able to do something that they love in this community.
The future of Bemidji State Women's Athletics is to fight for opportunities for women to continue to succeed and compete at a high level in college athletics.
The future of Bemidji State Women's Athletics is bright, very bright, full of champions, and the willingness to always reach for more. Let's go, Beavs!
The future of Bemidji State Women's Athletics is making hard work and effort our signature.
It's something that is very exciting and that we can all be very proud of.